Welcome to another End Result. I am Pastor Lynn Rollins of Blow the Trumpet Ministries, and I have the pleasure of interviewing Michael Lindsey. Hello, Michael. Welcome.
Hello. Glad to be here.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. You know, you're a man of many experiences, not only in ministry, which we'll touch on, but also your community interests. And I just want to share the titles of some of those, if I may. The Third Cross Ministries, Charity House Ministries, Aurora Mental Health Center, Jefferson County Sheriff Department, City of Miami Police Department. So of all those that I named, which are you most proud of your service with?
That's a really, really difficult question because there's two universes. Mm-hmm. There's the secular world.
Yes.
And there's the world of faith and belief and ministry. Mm-hmm. And I would say they're not completely different in some ways, but it's apples and oranges. So in the secular world, I would say my work with the Miami Police Department ranks highest. Mm-hmm. In the secular world, I've been blessed to be a part of Agape Christian Church under Pastor Wofolk and Miss Eddie Wofolk. Yeah. And they are people who have, to use a cliche, walk the walk. Mm-hmm. They're not empire builders. They plant seeds. They nurture people, myself included. And so the spiritual work that I've done has been almost exclusively with the Agape Christian Church, which of those others are initiatives of that church. Mm-hmm. So I'm proud of both areas pretty equally.
Okay. All right. Well, speaking on the ministry side, the faith-based side, when did you receive the revelation of Jesus Christ?
You know, there wasn't a specific moment, quite frankly. That was a really long journey. And a friend of mine, I'll just use her first name, Dee, was attending Iowa School of Theology. And she sort of challenged me to go down and audit a class. Mm-hmm. I began to attend Agape Christian Church some 20 odd years ago, mm-hmm. and just continued to sort of open my mind up to the possibilities of a relationship with God. And because of the work of that church, which tiny little church that does a massive amount of work, not dissimilar to Blow the Trumpet, quite frankly. You know, small church, a lot of work. So it was an evolution over time to the point where I graduated from Iowa School of Theology with a master's degree in specialized ministry, and eventually asked the church to ordain me as a faith leader. And in our church we have one pastor. We don't use the word reverend. Okay, so I refer to myself as a faith leader within that ministry. And so it was a process, a very long, decade-long process.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So your faith in Jesus Christ has brought you thus far, it sounds like what you're saying to me. And even to have a master's of specialized ministries and in theology and Antioch University. I had my major, in psychiatry. And it was very challenging at times because being a believer and being in secular classes of psychology that believes more in science and then the revelation of Christ, I always made a decision to always mention him in whatever I did. And it was my opportunity, even though at that time I wasn't a minister, to lift up the name of Jesus. So how was your experience in psychology, and why the interest in there?
Well, I'm sorry to laugh. I'm laughing at myself.
No, you're fine.
That also was a long journey. I came back from Vietnam in 1968 at 19 years of age. I commanded a 105 millimeter howitzer at age 19 over there, had a command of a 7-man gun crew at 19 years of age. Came home and couldn't find a place to fit. I became interested in my own personal journey of trying to change, because quite frankly, I was a French fry short of a Happy Meal when I came home. And you just can't, people don't really understand that when you go to war, you come back, you're not the same.
You're not the same.
So I became interested in, and then worked in a alcohol detox facility, worked in a battered women's shelter, worked in a juvenile detention facility, became increasingly interested in both helping individuals change and society change. My work in a battered women's shelter was a lot about social change. And I began to recognize that there was a link between individual misbehavior and dysfunction and our society's dysfunction. The two were linked. One created the other to some extent. And I became interested in the issue of choice and opportunity. And so it became this weave of wanting to create social change and individual change simultaneously. And there's a thing called the ecological model of intervention. And the ecological model of intervention says to be effective, if we really, really, truly want to help people change, we have to help them change their entire social system. Who they hang out with, how they spend their time, what their values are. So had to work with families, had to work with communities, had to work with the individual, had to work with our institutions to create a different set of values, different set of attitudes, as well as work with individuals for their internal growth. And my profession, I was at odds with the other professionals a lot because I did not have a values-neutral program. My program had values. These certain behaviors were not acceptable, and I made no pretense of otherwise. So if you came to my program was essentially an attraction model as opposed to a coercion model. Even though people were sent to me by the court, when they came in the door, my program was called the third path. 3 paths, there's chaos, there's death, you can kill yourself or somebody else, or you can change. And every intervention I did started with that premise. And I would tell them right out the bat, those are your 3 choices. You want to live in chaos, you want to kill yourself or somebody else, there's the door, you can leave. And they'd say, well, the court said I have to be here, and I'd say the court does not run my program.
Yes.
So it was not that big a transition to move to the faith side where, frankly speaking, I have the same attitude. I believe the church writ large has lost its way and has abandoned the public square and has abandoned our communities and allows horrendous behavior to be promoted. Drug use, gambling, okay, to name 2. Okay. Why? Because they want to make money off of that. They want to tax people. So they literally allow people to go into either a sinful, if you want to talk about the faith side, or a destructive side, if you want to talk about secular, dysfunctional. So they allow people to destroy their lives, so why? So they can have a hedonistic lifestyle, so that the state can collect money, get taxes. Why did we put marijuana in? Because it was a moneymaker.
Yes.
It's disgusting. It's completely disgusting. So I've always had a strong set of values. I carried them with me in my private practice as a therapist. I carried them with me into the institutions you named, and I carried them with me into the ministry.
Amen. That's good, because the way I always looked on it is that hurting people hurt people.
Yes.
And to get to the core of what the hurt is, they have to make a choice. They have to make a decision. Do I want to stay down, like you said, this path, or do I want a better path to greatness and resolve and healing?
Yes.
Absolutely. What would you, looking back, I want you to look back, what would you have done differently in any of these fields, whether it's secular or faith-based? What would you have done differently?
Oddly enough, in the secular world, I would have, and there are reasons why this didn't occur, but I would have really focused on my education more so that I could have developed some research skills, so that I could have used the academic environment, the publishing environment, the publishing of research, because I already did training. I've trained judges, therapists, police officers, ministers, literally almost in every state in the United States, including St. Lucia down in the Caribbean. So that's one thing I would have done. I think the second thing that I would have done in that arena is recognize that what I was dealing with in terms of violent offenders directly related to a quote from Nietzsche, which was, "When you fight the monster, be careful not to become the monster, and when you stare into the abyss stares back in you." I dealt with so much violence and so much death and so much destruction that it really affected me adversely. And then my daughter was murdered on top of which was a massive, massive blow. And I literally lost my way. I would have found an anchor to stay anchored into more tightly in that work, and I got isolated. You cannot get isolated when you fight evil.
No.
Because evil will eventually creep in and you begin to develop some pretty unhealthy behaviors. Mine was I tried to rescue everybody on the planet, that regardless of the cost to myself. I've lost complete perspective on what my role could and should be. And I had to actually quit being a therapist. So that's what I would change there. And in terms of the ministry, I think I would do what I'm doing now, which is to increase my studies and really increase my reliance on faith, and hopefully wished I had found that as an anchor for my secular work.
True. That's very true. You know, anything we do wholeheartedly for the Lord will last. It's a firm foundation because it's built on the rock of Jesus. And I appreciate that because sometimes we do have regrets, but I think it's so important, don't you, to learn from those regrets and build upon them. I'm sorry for the loss of your daughter. That can really be very hard to overcome. But it takes faith to know that with that loss, you will see her again based on what God's word says. But that takes faith to believe, because it's not like she can walk in the door anymore. And I think, as like you stated, being challenged in that, I don't know the basis of her passing, but I do know it's hurtful. It's very hurtful. But for you to persevere took faith, because a lot of people don't come back from that. And I speak to that because I lost my brother. His was, I don't know the means of your daughter's passing, but my brother's was just instantly. And so it's like you really get hit, you know, and you know what that's like, and it's still painful for you. I can sense that. And I pray you're healing in that, which will, with all your training and your work experience, you're giving back to help somebody else's daughter. You're giving back to help somebody else's mother. And with that, you know, that can bring some form of healing to you, don't you believe?
Redemption is the word that I use. Now, there are those that would say, well, you're redeemed by faith. Okay, and okay, I understand that, I accept that, but and there's the but part of this. I'm not dead in front of Jesus Christ yet. I'm right here on this planet.
Exactly.
And there's still the secular world, and there's still secular concerns. And I can no longer live with myself standing on the sidelines. I went away for literally 10 years and spent a lot of time trying to come into reconciliation with God's creation, humanity. God and I had some issues. It's like, okay, God, you turned us loose down here with free will. That might not have been the best idea on the planet, because we don't seem to be able to handle it. You know, we're pretty narcissistic, selfish, thoughtless, short-sighted, prone towards hedonism and self-indulgence and irresponsibility. And 10 years later, I got a call from the Agape Church with Miss Eddie Woolfolk, and she asked me to come down and participate in some work they were doing. And I thought, okay, you've been asking for a message, you've been asking for, okay, what do you want from me, God, in this process? I'm all right. So I came down, met Pastor Rollins and some others, and said, okay, we're going to lean back into this. Maybe not the way others. I'm not a peaceful person. Okay?
What do you mean by you're not a peaceful
Miss Eddie
person?
Woolfolk is a peaceful person. Pastor Rollins is a peaceful person. You strike me as a peaceful person.
At times.
I'm more of a cut off their ear kind of an apostle type.
So you're like Peter, cut it
I'm
off
like
and let
Peter.
the Lord heal it, right?
I'm more like Peter.
That's okay.
Yeah.
But that's what we saw, is that there was the Peter there. There was the Judas there.
Yes.
And I think he was showing us, as you pretty much relate to, is that there was not perfect disciples.
Nope. Nope.
They were people he called, just like he called you, just like he called me. And so we work with what we got. We work with what we've come out of, hopefully to better somebody else. That's good. Now, when you were working with Aurora Mental Health Center, and they're bringing and voters have approved the mushrooms, the psychotic mushrooms. What's your play on that?
There appears to be some evidence that psychedelics can act as a transformational agent. It's not my area of expertise. There seems to be some evidence that marijuana has some medicinal purposes. And it's no different than any other drug. Thorazine or lithium or pick one that we create in a laboratory. We could say God created it, sort of natural. But when you start talking about legalizing things for recreational use, you've moved away from the concept of healing and medicine and some kind of structured process. And there's plenty of evidence emerging that marijuana in particular can be very hazardous to people's mental health, especially the evolving brains of youngsters. There's evidence emerging that if you have a predisposition toward major mental illness, that something in that psychoactive process can actually push you in that direction. And if you stay strung out on any chemical or anything, if you get up every day and eat 5 pounds of mac and cheese, right? You're a chemical being. You're messing with the chemistry of your body. Not good, bad things are not going to pass you by. So my opinion is this notion that we should be able to do anything we want because it's our body and we can ingest anything we want, treat our body in any way we want, is foolishness. You know, and we need to re-engage the community and say, well, let's take a step back and look at this about what we're going to do. All you have to do is, what we're doing doesn't match what they're doing in Europe, by the way. I challenge people who use Europe as an example to go look at what they're doing in Europe, because this is not it.
The home of the free.
Yeah, well,
Free to do whatever, huh?
Free to do whatever. Good luck with that.
Yeah, right, exactly. So I thank you for what you've been sharing. Now I want to give you a few minutes before we close. What's the end result, Michael?
The end result of which, ma'am? Could you be more clear?
The end result for you of the things that we discussed, the things that you participated, experienced, on both sides, the faith-based and the secular. What's the end result? What is next? What is next?
Well, Pastor Rollins and I keep mentioning Pastor Rollins because he's been a great service to me, and we've come up with this notion of one body. We are collectively one body. And there are a lot of forces, political forces, social forces, that keep trying to pit us against each other, spiritual forces, evil. And we have to put an end to that. And everybody recognizes that when you talk about it, everybody goes, yes, but we need to consciously, authentically, intentionally, with awareness, begin to live into this notion that we are one body. We aren't going to all get along at every moment in time, but we can find commonality. And I'm going to say the word I, in this, because this is where I want to go. I'm not saying the whole universe wants to go here. I want us to really begin to work on preventable death, suicide, homicide, and drug overdoses. Now, there's other preventable death, heart attacks, cancer that are induced by smoking, for instance. That's not my focus. Homicide, suicide, and drug overdoses. And I want us to recognize that we have down south of the border the cartels. We have gangs. And when I talk about gangs, I'm not talking about little Johnny on the corner.
Yeah, right.
You know, little Johnny, you and I and Pastor and little Johnny's father can go rescue little Johnny, right? Say, well, there's another place for you, son. I'm talking about the cartels. I'm talking about 1%er motorcycle gangs. I'm talking about the national gangs, the Aryan Brotherhood, MA, the Mexican Mafia. I'm talking about that level of gangs that is busy pushing their soldiers, their infrastructure, their attitudes, their values into our communities. They have billions of dollars. They're brutal. They're dangerous, and one little community can't take them on. If we get busy working together as one body, we can put an end to a lot of the misery that's in our community.
How do you do that with hierarchy?
Okay. You have to form an organization that is secular and faith-based. It shares common language and a common vision. And then you start attacking the problem, one institution, one set of values. Remember the social ecological model of intervention? You intervene with the individual, the family, the community, the state, and the nation. And you set up these organizations in multiple counties, multiple states, and you create communication links between each one of those entities. And as people find out different things about cartels working in their area, then you work with what I call the alphabet soup, the FBI, the ATF, the DEA, the CBI, the alphabet soup, the state legislature, and you begin to crack down on them. So down here in the community, we identify a little cartel soldier. We can then go to the alphabet soup and say, this guy's a cartel soldier. We don't want him in our community.
How many will go?
Say again?
How many will go?
How many will go? What do you mean?
Well, what I'm saying is how many will seriously go to be that voice?
You don't need many, as it turns out. The domestic violence movement, the drunk driving movement, the sexual assault movement, they didn't start out with millions of people. They started out with a handful of people with an idea, right? You could trace it back to the one group that started it.
Driving, in the organizations.
Next thing you know, you had mothers of drunk drivers across. That's the model, right?
Yes.
It's not like I'm saying let's do something that's never been done.
Right.
You know, it's just never been done in this arena. There's lots of work being done. Don't get me wrong. There's lots of work being done, but we're losing the battle because the battle's too big for one small group.
It is, and I believe that's where the godly wisdom comes in, and the total. For me, I just say that I really have my faith, and I've dealt with some dark things in my past, in my life, and I know it was only through the wisdom from God that I still sit here before you today. Some things are too deep to trust other people with, so you have to have that relationship and that faith base. We had young men dropping cars off here right in our cul-de-sac, and the wisdom that came to me that they're stealing cars and putting them there. So I went by my faith and watching and put oil. My faith is, I have a gift of faith, so my faith goes really high in what God can do. And putting that oil cross in the center of our cul-de-sac. Next thing, they were involved in that police shooting on Peoria just recently. And I knew in my heart that those were the same young men that were dropping those cars off here. And what I'm saying in the end result, it takes it takes all of us, like you said, it takes the one body, but it takes one Lord to help us as well. And now this is the resolve from the path they took. But I thank you because it gave me food for thought, talking with you today, and I thank you for your service. I thank you for your commitment. I thank you for your integrity. I thank you for your character. All these things radiate from you, Michael, to me. And I thank God that even through the valleys that you continue to climb up. You keep doing that in faith, believing, because your reward is coming. And I thank you for this opportunity to sit down with you. I enjoyed the conversation. And thank you for joining us on the end result with Michael Lindsey. Thank you. This is Pastor Lynn Rollins, Below the Trumpet Ministry, saying,